Now that the weekend is over, let's do a deep dive on Scream 6. Let's get into it. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. Now that the weekend is over and we got our first big horror release of 2023. I hope you all got a chance to see it this weekend on the big screen and you know what movie I'm talking about, Scream 6. I got to see it Thursday night with my buddy Dale_A from the Bat and Spider podcast. Do me a favor, go over and check those guys out at Apple Podcasts or Spotify and subscribe. Give them a 5-star rating because they deserve it. And I had my non-spoiler out of theater reaction on Thursday night. I uploaded that. If you haven't seen it yet and you want to check that out, just scroll on down. But today we're going to go into spoilers on this film. And before we do that, please do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here, great, would appreciate that. Scream 6 just dropped on Friday, about a little over a year from the release of Scream 5. And this one was directed by the same directing team, Matt Benatelli-Open and Tyler Gillette of Radio Silence. They directed a really cool horror film, Ready or Not. If you've never seen that, check it out. The movie kicks ass. And our returning cast are survivors of Scream 2022 or Scream 5. Jenna Ortega is back as Tara Carpenter. Her sister, played by Melissa Barrera, is back as Sam. Mason Gooding is back as Chad. Jasmine Savoy Brown, Mindy Woodsboro the year before, and they're back now. We got some new cast members. Well, we also got Gale Weathers back. Courtney Cox is back as Gale Weathers. I know you saw that in the trailer. Dermot Mulroney is a new character in this film as Detective Bailey. Roger Jackson's back to voice Ghostface, the voice on the phone. Skeet Ulrich is back as Billy Loomis. We see him here and there. Sam seeing him in her, memories or visions of Billy. And fan favorite, Hayden Panettiere is back as Kirby. She's an FBI agent in this film. And at the beginning of this film, to get into this, to set this up, we got the great Samara Weaving, who worked with Radio Silence on Ready or Not. And I wish she had a bigger role, but in this small beginning part of the movie, she is fantastic as always. That girl's a rock star. And she shows up and she's at a bar. We're in New York City now, folks. We moved from Woodsboro to New York City. Not the first time we've taken Scream out of Woodsboro. We did it in the second one and the third one. But we took it to New York City on this one. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And she plays Laura. She's a professor at this college that Tara and Mindy and Chad go to. And she teaches a class on slasher films. And she's supposed to be meeting this guy at this bar, and she gets this phone call from the guy, and he's having a hard time finding the bar. She goes outside, goes in this alley trying to find him, and she's getting killed by somebody wearing a Ghostface costume. And the guy, and here's where it changes up a little bit, and it surprised me. I thought this was really clever. The guy takes the costume off, puts it in his back, and takes off. Goes back to his apartment. We see his face, everything. We learn his name. His name's Jason. And he goes back to his apartment, and his apartment mate is in on this with them. And their plan is to kill Tara and Sam because they go to college with them. And he gets a phone call from who he thinks is his roommate, disguised as Ghostface. And he's watching Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, which I thought was a nice touch. It was cool to see that, even though it's not a really good film, but it's just nice to see that nod to another horror franchise that went to the Big Apple. And he ends up finding his roommate dismembered in his refrigerator, and he gets killed by Ghostface. So I thought that was a nice little misdirection there at the beginning, because I thought this character was going to be our new killer, and they were just doing it in like a different way, but he gets killed by Ghostface. Now we're reintroduced to Tara and Sam and Chad and Mindy. And Sam went to New York with Tara. She's not going to college. She's working like little crappy jobs just to stay close to her sister, because she's still very much affected from what happened the year before, where Tara's going the other direction. She's going out and partying and trying to go on with her life. She even says it, I'm just trying to get on with my life. I don't want to live in the past. And now that her mother is out of their lives, so it's just them together, and they're very close with Mindy and Chad. So basically it's Tara, Sam, and Quinn is their other flatmate or apartment mate in this little apartment in New York City. And pretty soon they realize the Ghostface killer has come to New York City after them. And we're introduced to Detective Bailey because his daughter is Quinn, who lives with them, and she gets killed in a pretty cool scene in the apartment. They're about to sit down and have dinner, and they think she's in her room having sex. Well, here she ends up getting killed, and her boyfriend is dismembered in the bathtub. And the only way for them to get out is to go across this ladder to this guy that Sam has been seeing behind everybody's back. And it's a very intense, very well-directed scene. And they get out of it. Gail's brought back in. We're reintroduced to Gail. She's living in New York in like a penthouse apartment with her boyfriend. And she wants to help them, but they're a little standoffish with her. And we're introduced to Kirby. She comes in because she's been following the ghost case. Any Ghostface killings that comes across her desk, she was working in Atlanta and she made a beeline from New York City. So we're introduced to Kirby, which is cool to bring that character back. Obviously, Nev Campbell's not back. And pretty much, it's a Scream movie, baby. We get a bunch of set pieces, which are really well done. The directing here is on point with this film. I got to give Radio Silence credit. They directed the shit out of this film. I thought it looked great. Suspenseful in the scenes that need to be suspenseful. There's some humor here. We also get, stuff, meta stuff going on here as well about the franchise. And basically towards the end, we find out that whoever's doing this has this old movie theater, and they have all these artifacts from all the killers, all the costumes they have up on mannequins, Billy Loomis's shirts there from when he got killed. All these things throughout all the films, we see all these different artifacts. And it's definitely nostalgia. You see things you recognize from all the films if you're a fan of this franchise. And I thought that was pretty cool. And just to fast forward through some of this, at the end, they set up where they're going to try to trap Ghostface at this theater. We end up finding out there's 2 ghost faces, and Detective Bailey's in on it because Quinn, his daughter, faked her death because she's one of the ghost faces, and his son, who's been hanging out with them, Ethan, who you would never suspect because he is kind of acts like this little quiet, meek kind of kid. And they're the killers, and Detective Bailey's in on it because Richie was his son and their brother, and they want to take revenge on Sam and Tara. And that was basically the whole plot, and they end up killing them, and that's the end of the film. What to like about this film? Well, the acting's really well done. Jenna Ortega's a rock star. I mean, she's huge coming off of Wednesday. And last year she had Scream 2022 and X, and she was fantastic in all those projects. I loved Wednesday, her portrayal of Wednesday. So, I think Melissa Barrera is good here as well. I think she's even a little bit better here than she was in the last film. Jasmine Savoy Brown's great. Mason Goody. Everybody's good across the board except for one actor, which we'll talk about in a minute, some of my positives. So the directing's really well done. The acting, the set pieces are fantastic. Suspenseful. This Ghostface is very violent. It's very bloody. Might be the bloodiest one of the whole franchise. I don't know. Probably is tied with part 4, because I think part 4 was probably the bloodiest until this one. They definitely go for the throat here. There's some great kills, although they're all stabbing mostly, like the rest of the Scream franchise. Because I know some people say about, it's all the same kind of kills. They don't get super creative, but I think they're brutal and they're really well done here. I think for the most part, the film is fairly well written, except for some instances, which we'll get into in a few minutes. The effects, everything looked like all the blood was real, which I always appreciate because CGI blood looks like shit. So I really did like this film. I think it's a very solid Scream film. Now let's get into my negatives. There's people in this film that do dumb shit. One of which is Gale Weathers. There's a scene that they alluded to in the trailer where Gale's boyfriend gets killed by the killer, and she has to face the killer. So she kind of goes into this walk-in closet, grabs her gun, full magazine in the gun. Ghostface is talking to her through the door, or on the phone, and she says how she's going to shoot him in the face. Now, she's in a room where there's only one way in, through the door. It's the perfect opportunity to keep yourself safe, because if he comes through the door, you got a fully loaded gun. You could shoot this son of a bitch. What does she do? She shoots through the door, and then she opens the door and goes out in this big room where there's a dozen different ways to get to her. And Gail's been through this shit before. And I was like, it made me groan in my seat. Even though it's a well-directed scene, it's suspenseful, but that aspect of it, I know in slasher films, people got to do dumb shit to forward the plot. It's a given through slasher films, through history. People have done dumb shit. But for a character that's been through this multiple times in the past, to do what she did, considering she had the upper hand, she was in a safe place with one entrance, and she had a fully loaded gun, I don't know why they made her look so stupid in doing that. And she does get stabbed, and she has to go to hospital. Now, Gale does survive, so don't you worry. I'm sure she will be back for the next one, because I think they already greenlit Scream 7, which I'm fine with, because I did enjoy this film, but I just have some issues. There's another one. Mindy gets stabbed. Now, Ghostface was brutal and finishes the kills throughout the whole film until we get to the latter half. Starting with Gale, Mindy, that subway sequence we've seen played out on the trailer. It's a fantastic sequence, very suspenseful. Mindy gets stabbed by the Ghostface killer on the train multiple times. She's fine. She shows up at the end. She once goes to the hospital, but she shows up at the end anyway. Like, she wasn't even stabbed. Considering they set up how brutal Ghostface was throughout the film, and I like Mindy as a character, I didn't want to see her die, but when she gets stabbed like she did, it's like, don't be afraid to kill off some of the main characters if you're going to go for it. And to me, they held back. Then there's another one. Once we get to the theater and we figure out, well, there's a scene in the lobby of the old theater, and Chad gets attacked by both ghost faces, and he's basically turned into Swiss cheese. I mean, they stab him multiple times. And at the end of the film, he survives. I'm like, what in the F? There's no way. And I like Chad as a character too, but there's no way he's making it through that. The guy was pouring blood out of his body. There's no way he survived that. Now we come to the elephant in the room of this film and what really sank the third act, because I was on board for this film, and then we hit the third act. I liked that there was two different ghost faces and they were brother and sister team. I didn't mind that, and the actors played up well, and they're crazy. The seasoned actor is what let the third act down. Dermot Mulroney was in a different goddamn movie than what this movie was. I don't know if it was in the script written that way, if he was directed to act this way, but when he gives his monologue about why they're doing this, and that he's Richie's father, and that he helped Richie collect all these things, it's like, this guy's a cop. Nobody checked that his son was a serial killer the year before, number one, and how did they acquire all this shit? And a police officer was helping him acquire all this shit. And where'd they have it? In their house. It doesn't make any sense. I like that aspect of it if they would have went in a different direction. But I'm not going to go with what I wish they would have done, because it doesn't really matter. I'm not the one writing this movie. But Dermot Mulroney is awful in this scene, in the last act. I was fine with him through most of the film, although his acting was a little off through the whole thing. And I like Dermot Mulroney as an actor. But in the last act, when it discovers he is part of this, he's like in a totally different movie than what we're in here. His performance is very bad. Like, I don't know if he was directed that way or this is what he brought to it, but it was almost like me and Dale were talking about it after the movie, and it was like he was in a sketch show, like doing like a heightened version of it, like in a comedy sketch show almost. Like, he's terrible, and he drags the third act down. He really does, and I hate to say that, but his acting is atrocious in the third act. I sat there in disbelief. I'm like, is this really happening? Like, what in the hell? This is the best take you can get from him? And he's a seasoned actor. I've liked him in other things, but here, once we get to the third act, he sinks it so bad. Plus, I think they drag it out a little bit too much, the third act. Yeah, so in that aspect, it kind of took the wind out of the movie's sails for me. I was on board until he got revealed and started giving his monologue, and I'm like, what in the F is going on here? He's awful here. I hate to say that about an actor that I typically enjoy, but he was definitely, it was like he was in a totally different movie. He was almost like he was in a Scary Movie and not a Scream movie. It's that bad, his acting. I don't know what the hell he was doing. And if he couldn't pull off crazy, they should have hired somebody else, because he really sinks the third act of this film. And I hate saying that, because I was in on it until that part, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? What is going on here? They dispatch a lot of killers, like I said, and we have a happy ending. Kirby gets shot. Another one, Kirby gets shot multiple times, and she survives too. She walks out of the building. I'm like, everybody has plot armor here. What in the hell is going on? I didn't want Kirby to die either, because I like that character. But they were afraid to kill off the main core of the cast. And it's like, I want to see another Scream movie, so don't get me wrong. I'm being negative here on the third act because I think Dermot Mulroney really does sink it. But yeah, there's some problems here. It's not a perfect movie, and it's not... I'm going to do a ranking video, so I'm not going to go into where I place this in the franchise, but there's definitely some problems here, especially in the last act of the film, unfortunately. Like I said, overall, I enjoyed this film until that third act. The other minor negative, I would say, the New York setting does nothing for this movie. Besides establishing shots, this could have been name your city anywhere, USA. It didn't have to be in New York. They don't play it up, which is fine. I get they didn't film this in New York. They shot this up in Montreal and Toronto, I do believe, because it's very expensive to shoot in New York. And this movie had a $35 million budget. It would have ate up their budget. I get that, but they could have just went with like a 7 vibe where it could have been any city USA, and not even played up the New York aspect, because it doesn't really do anything for the film, honestly. They don't show them in any landmarks or anything, so this could have been anywhere in any city. It didn't have to be New York City, but whatever. That's a small minor complaint. It's not really a big deal. At the end of the day, I did still enjoy this film. It's a very solid Scream film, and honestly, this whole franchise is pretty... Out of all the horror franchises, Scream has been the most consistent. Yes, some films aren't as good as other ones, but overall, if you watch any of the movies in the Scream franchise, they're all pretty damn entertaining, and you can't say that about some of the other franchises. Even Halloween, which I love the Halloween franchise, is my favorite, but there's some stinkers in the Halloween franchise. Where Scream, I feel they're all very entertaining to some degree. So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm actually gonna... I gave it an 8 out of 10 out of the theater. I'm gonna just tick it down a little bit because I've been thinking about it for a few days. I'm gonna give Scream 6 a 7.5 out of 10. This might grow on me through further watches. I just think that third act is hard to get through because of Dermot Mulroney sinks it. And I hate saying that because I like him as an actor, but he was not right for this part if this is the best he can do. 7.5 out of 10 for Scream 6. If you've seen it yet, leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I would appreciate that. I'll be back soon with a Scream franchise ranking video, but until then, bye.